You are 26 the first time you see the letter. It arrives in a plain envelope forwarded twice, addressed to a name you haven't used since your grandmother died 3 years earlier. Her maiden name, buried in a trust document nobody explained to you at the funeral. Inside is a single page from a law firm in a city you visited twice in your life. It says, in language dense enough that you have to read it 4 times, that you hold a 40% beneficial interest in a commercial property trust. You don't recognize the address at first, then you do. It's a 6-story building downtown, the kind you've walked past 100 times without looking up. Ground floor coffee shop, a dry cleaner, 4 floors of leased office space above. You've bought coffee there. You had no idea you owned nearly half of it. You don't tell anyone. Not your roommate, not your parents, who mention the building sometimes without knowing what it means to you now. You sit with the letter for 6 days before calling the number at the bottom of the page. The trust, you learn, was set up by your grandmother's brother, a man you met twice briefly, who ran a modest but disciplined investment partnership for 40 years before he died with almost no public footprint. He bought into the building in 1987, restructured the ownership through a holding trust in 2003, and named beneficiaries who, in most cases, had no idea they were beneficiaries at all. You are one of 3. The other 2, the attorney tells you, have chosen to remain anonymous as well. You don't ask their names, they don't ask yours. For the first 8 months, you do almost nothing. You read filings, you learn what a triple net lease is, you learn what a cap rate means, what vacancy risk looks like on a 6-story building in a market that's neither booming nor dying. Just steady, unglamorous, the kind of asset nobody writes about because nothing dramatic ever happens to it. You learn that the building generates $1.9 million a year in gross rental income, and that after debt service, taxes, and management fees, your 40% share nets you just under $310,000 annually. Nobody in your life knows this number exists. You are still working your job. A mid-level operations role at a logistics company, $61,000 a year, health insurance, a cubicle with a window you have to share credit for with 3 other people. You don't quit. You've thought about it briefly in the shower, in the way people think about things they already know they won't do. But quitting requires an explanation, and an explanation requires the truth, and the truth requires becoming a different kind of person. One who gets asked questions at dinner parties, one whose name shows up somewhere searchable. You are not interested in becoming that person. You are interested in the building continuing to exist quietly, the way it has for 37 years, generating income for people who mostly never see it. You are 28 when you first walk into the building as an owner rather than a customer. You don't announce yourself. You buy a coffee, same as always, from the same barista who has made your order the same way for 2 years and has no idea her rent is paid, in part to you. You take the elevator to the 3rd floor under the pretense of a meeting that doesn't exist, and you walk the hallway slowly, looking at the tenant directory, an accounting firm, an insurance broker, a small architecture practice with 4 employees. You know their lease terms, you know their payment history, you know from the filings that the architecture firm has been 13 days late twice this year, which the property management company has quietly not flagged because the group as a whole nets out fine. You know all of this. None of them know you exist. You are 30 when the roof needs replacing. It's a $340,000 capital expense, split proportionally among the beneficiaries, and for the first time, you have to make a real decision. Not just receive a check, but authorize a cost. You approve it over a phone call from your car in the logistics company parking lot, on your lunch break, wearing a company polo with your first name embroidered on the chest. 12 minutes later, you're back at your desk answering emails about a shipment delay in Ohio, and nobody around you has any idea that you just approved $250,000 in construction work 3 miles away. This is the year you start keeping 2 separate calendars. One for your actual life, one, mental only, never written down, for the building. Lease renewal dates, insurance review cycles. The names of the 3 people on the management company's team who actually run the property day to day, none of whom you've ever met in person, all of whom refer to you in every email, only by your late great-uncle's original trust designation, Beneficiary C. You are 32 when the coffee shop's lease comes up for renewal, and the owner, a woman named Priya who has run the shop for 9 years, who knows your coffee order, who has no idea who you are, so ask the property manager in an email you're copied on under your trust, alias for a small rent concession given how difficult the last 2 years have been for small retail tenants. You could deny it. Financially, it wouldn't matter much either way. You approve the concession within an hour, adjusting the terms slightly better than she asked for. She never learns who did it. She just gets an email from the management company confirming new terms. And thanks them, not you, because you don't exist to her. Not really. Not as a person, only as 3 letters and a number on a distribution schedule. You don't do this because you're secretly generous in some performative sense you'd ever tell anyone about. You do it because from where you sit, it's simply the correct decision. The same way you'd approve a maintenance request or an insurance renewal. Quiet, procedural, invisible. By 34, your share of the building's value after 2 market appraisals and a modest cap rate compression in the neighborhood is worth just under $4.1 million on paper. A number that exists only in a filing cabinet at a law firm and in the private ledger you keep for yourself. Updated twice a year, never shared. Your actual bank account, the one anyone could see if they looked, still shows a logistics company salary and a fairly ordinary savings pattern. The building's income gets swept into a separate account under the trust name, reinvested mostly, spent rarely, and never in a way that would change how you live day to day. You still drive the same car. You still live in the same 2-bedroom apartment, 5 minutes from the building, close enough that you walk past it most days without anyone knowing what that walk means to you. Your landlord, an actual landlord, for the apartment you personally rent, has no idea that the person filling out his tenant application makes more money in 6 weeks from a building 3 blocks away than he probably makes from this entire complex in a year. There are moments that come close to unraveling it. A coworker at a work happy hour mentions offhand that her cousin works at the accounting firm on the 3rd floor of that building downtown and jokes about how nobody knows who actually owns these places anymore, how it's probably some faceless REIT or a rich family nobody's ever heard of. You laugh, agree, say something generic about how commercial real estate ownership is opaque by design. You order another drink, nobody notices anything. Another time, at your grandmother's old house, cleaning out a closet with your mother, you find an old photograph of your great uncle standing in front of a building you don't recognize at first, until you do. It's the same building. He's younger than you've ever seen him. Mid-30s maybe, standing on the sidewalk in a plain suit. Unremarkable. Nobody's idea of a man who was quietly assembling a fortune he'd spend the rest of his life not talking about. Your mother says, "I never understood what he actually did for work." You say you're not sure either. That part at least isn't a lie. You're 37 now. The building is worth more than it's ever been. Your share, adjusted for the latest appraisal, sits just above $5.6 million. You still work the same job, promoted twice since the original letter arrived, now managing a small team, still making a salary that looks, to anyone checking, entirely ordinary. You still buy coffee from Priya, who still doesn't know your name in any way that matters to her. You still drive past the building most days, sometimes glancing up at the 4th floor windows where the architecture firm keeps its lights on late, sometimes not looking at all, because after 11 years, it has simply become part of the landscape of your ordinary life. The one thing in it that isn't ordinary at all. You have never told anyone, not because you're ashamed and not because you think anyone would judge you for it. You've simply learned, the same way your great uncle apparently learned decades before you existed, that the value of an asset like this isn't only in what it generates, it's in how completely it can exist alongside an unremarkable life without either one disturbing the other. The coffee, the cubicle, the 2-bedroom apartment, and, 3 blocks away, quietly accruing value, 1 lease renewal at a time. 40% of a 6-story building that nobody, including the people who work inside it every single day, has ever once thought to ask you about.